My name is Miriam, and I am a MSA student. And today I'm going to be reading you my 2026 Ethics Essay Prize. And this topic invites us to consider the ethical weight of silence, and the questions below are offered as starting points. Is silence an act of compassion or complicity? When does silence protect dignity, and when does it betray it? When silence becomes complicit, what is your moral responsibility? Do we owe the world our voice, or are there moments where silence allows healing? Reflect on a time personally or publicly when silence itself became an ethical choice. What did you do? What did that moment reveal about conscience, courage, and responsibility? They say enlighten us, engage us, explore the ethics of any question that moves you, whether drawn from tension between silent speech or from any moral challenge close to home across the world. We're eager to learn from you.
All right, let's go ahead and kick it off then.
All right. So I call this The Things We Don't Say, the ethics of surviving a childhood in silence. Silence shaped the earliest chapters of my life, long before I understood the concept of ethics, before I learned the words like compassion, complicity, or moral responsibility. I was already living out those dilemmas in real time. In my world, silence wasn't the absence of sound. It was a survival strategy, a shield, and sometimes a cage. It protected the people I loved while erasing pieces of me. My ethical life didn't begin in a classroom or through philosophy. It began in a childhood where staying quiet felt safer than being heard. This essay examines the moral complexity of silence, from its role in childhood survival to its evolution into ethical responsibility to speak the truth for the sake of personal and generational healing. I now understand that my childhood silence operated within what ethicists call ethics of care, where loyalty and protection are prioritized over truth. Gilligan's Ethics of Care argues that caring for others without caring for oneself leads to moral imbalance and emotional harm, a dynamic that echoed throughout my own childhood. I was 6 years old when my parents disappeared for 3 days. 3 long days chasing whatever high pulled them away from our apartment and away from us. Even when they were physically present, they were often emotionally absent, so the role of caregiver shifted onto me naturally, quietly, without anybody acknowledging the exchange. Their absence, I stepped in silence, and I did what I could to make the apartment feel less scary. My siblings kept staring at the front door for footsteps that never came. I was 6, trying to steady my 7-year-old sister who froze with fear and my 4-year-old brother who copied everything I did. So I sat them on the carpet and I dug through the cabinets, praying there was something to make for dinner. I found 2 packs of beef ramen noodles and decided right then and there to turn the kitchen into our own Martha Stewart show. Anything to keep them from noticing the emptiness on the other side of the door. I slipped into a fake fancy voice and exaggerated every step like I was filming a cooking segment. Then I dragged a chair to the stove, climbed up and cooked the noodles while heating the hot dogs in the pot of water. I mixed it all together and made those soupy noodles kids swear taste like the 5-star meal. And honestly, they forgot our parents for a minute. They laughed, they ate, and the house didn't feel so heavy. After dinner, I put them to bed and I got everything ready for school the next morning. No one told me to. I already understood that if I didn't do it, no one would. Children raised in substance-abusing or chaotic households often assume adult roles far too early, a dynamic known as parentification, according to Hooper in 2007 and Hardin and Whitaker in 2011. When I finally learned that word, it felt like naming a ghost that had been living inside of me all along. Then came a knock. 2 CPS workers stood at our door, clipboards in hand, scanning the apartment as concern darkened their expressions. "Where are your parents?" they asked. The truth rose in my throat like a burning warning, but fear swallowed it down before it could escape. "They went to the store," I said steadily, practiced, unblinking despite the fact they had been gone 72 hours. Children often lie during CPS investigations because they fear family separation more often than remaining in an unsafe environment, according to Dunn in 2015. At 6, I didn't understand addiction, neglect, or state intervention, but I understood enough to know that telling the truth might break my family apart. This was the first time I was ever confronted with an ethical dilemma. Was my silence an act of compassion or complicity? Was I protecting my siblings or helping maintain a dangerous lie? At 6 years old, how was I supposed to know? Minutes later, My parents rushed home, tipped off by the neighbors who saw CPS outside. They walked inside smiling as though nothing had happened. I smiled too, sealing their story with my silence. Children in homes like mine often develop protective loyalty, hiding dysfunction to keep a household intact, according to Hooper in 2007. I'd already became that child. Silence at 6 felt like love, even as it carved away pieces of who I was becoming. But silence didn't stay innocent for long. The quiet I learned at 6 followed me everywhere, even to places no child should have ever been. By age 8, right around Christmas, while other kids were opening gifts, I was stepping into a much darker kind of holiday, one my mind wasn't old enough to understand. My parents dropped my sister and me off at the house of people they used to do drugs with. My sister wanted to stay. Our parents wanted freedom. The moment we walked in, something inside me sank. My dad's friend looked at me with the hunger I couldn't even taste, but my body recognized it long before my mind did. "I don't want to stay here. He's a bad man," I whispered to my mother. She brushed me off and promised me candy and soda if I stayed with my sister. So I did. That night, once the adults were high and my parents were gone, he walked in the room where I pretended to be asleep. His shadow reached me before he did, stretching across the wall like a warning carved in darkness. He leaned down, breath thick with chemicals, and whispered that if I screamed or told anyone, he would do it to my sister too. When it was over, the terror didn't leave my body. I curled in the corner of the mattress, sobbing and shaking so hard I could barely breathe. His wife woke to my crying and came to the doorway. She asked what had happened, but he cut in before I could speak. She had a nightmare. I remember locking eyes with her, hoping she would see the truth written all over my face, but fear held my tongue in place. I was too terrified to say anything. That night, he didn't even let me sleep. He kept me beside him until nearly 6 o'clock in the morning, making sure I stayed awake. And every time my body swayed with exhaustion, his threat replayed in my head. "If you make a sound, I'll do it to your sister too." The silence that followed wasn't just fear. It was a vow to protect her, even if I had to swallow my own screams. By the time dawn came, I knew I wasn't waiting to be saved. I was just trying to survive the night. What I didn't know was that my reaction was what had a name. It was a freeze response. The way the body shuts down and goes silent when a child senses danger. Research shows that children who are sexually abused often stay quiet because they fear threats or instincts to protect their siblings, according to McElvany. At 8 years old, silence wasn't a choice. Silence was captivity. That night carved silence into me like a second spine. I carried it home with me, tucked into all the places where my voice should have lived. I kept that silence for 4 years. At 12, the weight finally cracked. The silence I'd been carrying for years started spilling into everything. I had anger issues, outbursts, and behaviors no one could explain. My parents couldn't understand why I went from withdrawn to explosive without warning. They never connected it to the night I never spoke about. They only saw the anger, not the wound beneath it. But trauma has its way of resurfacing in the body, especially in children. A nervous system trained to survive often reacts in a way adults mistake for misbehavior, aggression, outbursts, and defiance, according to Cook. One day, shaking visibly and upset, I told him what had happened. I told him what he did. My mother didn't cry right away. She went quiet, like she was trying to wrap her mind around what she had just heard. But my father, he didn't even pause at all. He accused me of lying. He said that I was making it up and that I just wanted attention and I was trying to start problems. His disbelief didn't erase what happened to me, but it erased the safe landing I hoped my truth would have. Children who disclose sexual abuse in substance-affected or chaotic homes are often dismissed or ignored, not protected, a pattern widely documented in disclosure research, according to McElvany. After that moment, speaking up felt like setting myself on fire, only to be told I wasn't burning. So the silence I learned at 6 became the silence I lived with at 12, not because it protected me, but because telling the truth hurt more than keeping it in. That moment carved an ethical fault inside of me. When you speak the truth and it's dismissed, does silence become the safer choice, or does silence become betrayal to yourself? By 15, silence had grown roots so deep they felt permanent. I was pregnant with my first child when I first felt something dark, heavy inside of me. I didn't have words like bipolar disorder, depression, or mania. I just knew something was wrong. Research shows that bipolar symptoms in adolescence often begins as vague, unnamed emotional instability long before they have the language to explain it. According to Lewison in 2003, I recognized those signs in myself long before I understood what they meant. So when I finally tried to speak the truth, to admit that something inside me was slipping, a darkness I couldn't name, my words were crushed the moment they left my mouth. Their responses came fast, sharp, and familiar, looping in my head the way Christmas carols haunt every store in December, except there was nothing joyful in the melody. You're dramatic. You're fine. You just want attention. Each line cut deeper than the last. Their voices didn't just dismiss me, they drowned me. It felt like they were rewriting my reality in real time and telling me what I felt wasn't real, that my pain was imaginary, that the storm in my chest was nothing more than theatrics. And the worst part, a piece of me believed them. When your truth is treated like an inconvenience, you learn to swallow it whole and to smile through the ache. Their rejection didn't quiet me. It rehearsed me for the years I would spend hiding from my own mind. The silence that followed was suffocating. Don't speak, don't feel, survive. After that moment, I stuffed every fear, every sadness, every manic spike, and every crashing low in the same vault I had built as a child. Once again, the silence became my punishment, my survival tactic, and my cage, all at the same time. Silence at 15 wasn't protection. It was resignation. It was surrender. It was the belief that my suffering wasn't enough to have a name. That moment revealed a painful moral question I had never been allowed to ask. What responsibility does a child have to her own suffering when no adult takes responsibility for it? By 19, I was a mother of 4. Outside, I was functioning. I cooked, I cleaned, I worked, I kept the house running, I paid the bills. I showed up to class and held a 4.0 GPA like it was a lifeline. But my inside, my bipolar disorder was unraveling in waves I didn't understand. My highs would lift me for months at a time, 90 days of feeling unstoppable, brilliant, motivated, almost superhuman. Then, day 100 would come, everything would come spiraling down. The crash always came without warning, like someone suddenly turning off the lights in a room I just learned to navigate. One moment I was thriving, the next I was buried alive under a weight I couldn't name. Everything I had worked so hard for, the stability, the independence, the life I tried to build to escape my childhood, felt like it was slipping through my fingers. I kept believing, or maybe hoping, that if I worked hard and I did everything right, whatever was wrong with me would eventually just disappear. But it didn't. It followed me into adulthood like a shadow I couldn't outrun. Truthfully, facing it felt dangerous. In the back of my mind, I was terrified that admitting I needed help would lead to the one thing I spent my whole life trying to avoid: losing my children. And instead of getting help, I kept performing stability even as my mind was unraveling, a high-functioning woman on the outside and a collapsing one on the inside, with nowhere to fall and no one I trusted enough to catch me. There were nights I cried to my closest friend, begging for answers, hoping someone could fix what I didn't have the language to describe. But every time I ran into the truth I hated the most, the solution wasn't outside of me. The battle, the questions, the healing, they had been inside of me all along, waiting for me to speak. Here again at 19, I found myself standing at another ethical crossroads. When survival forces you to perform strength you don't actually have, does the performance eventually become another form of silence? I told myself I would fake it till I made it. But then I wondered, how much faking and breaking can a person fake before the fracture becomes real? For years, I believed that staying quiet meant staying in control. Silence required less energy than explaining what had happened on the inside of me. Silence was less risky than being judged. Silence to me was less dangerous than losing custody, a fear conditioned in me since childhood. Fear and stigma delay bipolar treatment for years or decades, according to Vegas Lopez. For me, it delayed this diagnosis for exactly 10. Eventually, the silence became too heavy to hold. At 25, everything finally broke open, not at home or alone in a bathroom, but in a too bright exam room of my OBGYN. I'd gone through the day as usual, even as I unraveled inside. When the doctor walked in and asked me, "How are you feeling?" something in me gave way. I tried to answer casually, but the words tangled in my throat before everything spilled out at once. How I couldn't hold a stable emotion anymore. How one day I felt charged with energy and the next I sank into darkness I couldn't explain. I told her how sad, angry, overwhelmed, and lost I felt, and how my moods were confusing my children and exhausting everyone around me, including myself. My whole body shook as if something catastrophic had happened, even though nothing had. Tears came so fast I could barely breathe. My chest felt like it was caving in. It wasn't sadness, though. It was years of swallowed emotion finally breaking through. Every scream I buried at 6, every ignored truth at 8, every rejection at 12, and every collapse at 15. Everything surged through me in that moment. I couldn't speak, I couldn't steady myself, and I just couldn't pretend anymore. That's when my OBGYN stepped in. She didn't rush me or dismiss me. She didn't tell me I was dramatic or seeking attention. She handed me tissue and placed a steady hand on my shoulder and said the first words in my life that ever felt like safety. You're not crazy. Something is wrong with you, but it can be treated with medication and therapy. You can get better. Everything you're describing sounds like bipolar 2 disorder. In the months that followed, as I finally sought help, I learned the truth I had spent years bleeding for. My father admitted he was bipolar 2 and he had never sought treatment. The same man who silenced me, called me dramatic, and made me feel unwanted, finally confessed that the darkness I carried was the same one he had been battling his whole life. He told me that I wasn't crazy, that what I felt was real, and that I got it from him. I didn't know it then, but my struggles had roots and I couldn't see them. Children with bipolar parents often feel the symptoms long before they understand their origins, according to Rendy. Hearing that after being blamed my entire life for my childhood symptoms I inherited felt like someone cracking open a door I'd been pounding on since birth. It wasn't an apology or repair, but it was the first time in my life my suffering wasn't treated like fiction. And in that rush of emotion came a realization I never allowed myself to see. None of this was weakness. It was an illness left unaddressed. It was trauma stored in my body. It was fear hardened into silence. When it finally broke apart in that exam room, as frightening as it was, it marked the beginning of my healing. For the first time, I began to understand myself. Therapy taught me that I was high functioning. I knew how to cope with silence. I knew how to perform normally. I knew how to carry chaos behind my ribs while keeping everyone else calm. I knew how to be quiet. I did not know how to be well. Eventually, those silent battles came loud cries for help. As a mother of 5 with severe bipolar disorder, silence wasn't strength anymore. It was suffocation. Using the voice I had been taught to bury is what saved me. In the end, silence felt complicit, and it forced me to ask, what happens when the silence that once protected you becomes the one thing that destroys you? My answer was simple, but it's terrifying. To speak, to name my truth, to break the generational silence that trained me to disappear. Therapists call this moment the rupture, the point where the coping mechanism that once saved you becomes the thing that holds you hostage. I learned that while I may not owe the world my voice, I owe it to myself and my 5 children who depend on the woman I've become. I didn't just survive my childhood, I built something from it. Today, as a SMU graduate student, a working intern, a working mother of 5, and someone pushing to create a nonprofit that helps children like me know there is a better world for them out there and that someone cares, I'm giving the kids the one thing I never had, proof that they matter. There is an ethics lesson here. Once you know the right thing to do, how many of us actually do it? And is it easier to do the right thing once you finally exit survival mode? I started my nonprofit because the child I once was deserved someone who would show up, and now I choose to be that person for others. My work isn't charity. It's an ethical response to the past where silence was my only protection. I want children like me to know better, that there's a better world out there than the one we were handed, one with stability, warmth, dignity, and someone who chooses them on purpose. And once you know what the right thing looks like, the real ethical question becomes, will you act on it? For me, doing this isn't optional. It's the responsibility that grew of the silence that I survived. Looking back from the scared 6-year-old to the exhausted young mother to the woman who finally spoke, I don't see silence as failure anymore. I see strength and fierce protection. I also see the moment my silence became too costly to carry. My story is not defined by the quiet that raised me, but the voice I built from its rubble. A voice that refuses to pass down generational silence and insists on dignity, truth, and healing. If I've learned anything, it is this. Silence is neither inherently virtuous nor inherently harmful. It becomes ethical or unethical depending on whom it protects, whom it harms, and whether it prevents truth, safety, or healing. Silence may have been your shelter once. It cannot be your home forever. Finding your voice isn't about being loud. It's about choosing yourself. It's the quiet shift where healing begins, because eventually silence stops feeling safe and starts feeling heavy. It stops protecting you and starts limiting you. And even though speaking up feels unfamiliar, Even though it asks more of you than you're used to giving, it's also a first step towards something better. Finding your voice is how you rise from the places that once held you down. It's how you say, I'm here. I still matter. Sometimes the simple act of speaking is enough to change your entire life.